I never imagined I'd end up at the center of a neighborhood scandal, but here we are. It all started with chime on my phone, a sound I usually associate with groceries arriving. This time, though, it marked the beginning of the strangest confrontation I've faced since moving into Oakwood Estates 3 months ago. The footage was crystal clear. At exactly 2:15 in the afternoon, a woman in oversized sunglasses and a sun visor crept onto my porch. She glanced around nervously, snatched my 2 grocery bags, and hurried off as if she had every right to them. What she didn't realize was that my doorbell camera had caught the entire performance. Every shifty glance and her clumsy retreat across my lawn. And it wasn't just any neighbor. It was Deborah Wilson, our HOA president, the one everyone secretly called Karen. The same woman who had lectured me about my trash cans being visible from the street was now stealing food off my doorstep. I replayed the footage 3 times, torn between disbelief and a strange sense of vindication. For weeks, I'd noticed missing items from my deliveries, an absent bag of apples, a missing carton of eggs. I always assumed the delivery service had made mistakes. Never did it cross my mind that someone in the supposedly upscale neighborhood was swiping them. Certainly not the woman who filled our inboxes with lectures on community standards. Working from home as a software developer, my schedule is crammed with calls and late-night coding sessions. Grocery delivery isn't a luxury for me. It's survival. Without it, I'd be living on protein bars from the vending machine at the gym down the street. So missing deliveries weren't just inconvenient. They threw off my entire week. That afternoon, the delivery notification came at 2:05. I was in the middle of an important meeting and couldn't step away. By the time I checked 10 minutes later, the porch was bare. No receipt, no groceries, just empty space. That's when I checked the footage and discovered the truth. What floored me wasn't just that Deborah stole them. It was how brazen she was about it. This was the same woman who welcomed me to the neighborhood with a thick binder of HOA bylaws and a veiled warning about upholding standards. She'd already dropped by twice to scold me about my lawn height and insist my mailbox needed repainting in the official shade of Oakwood cream. And now here she was, helping herself to my groceries in broad daylight. I debated confronting her directly, but new evidence was more powerful than anger. So I forwarded the video to the local police department's non-emergency email with a short explanation. Out of fairness, I also sent it to the HOA board with a polite note about unusual activity on my property. That's when things escalated. Within an hour, my phone buzzed with texts from neighbors. Apparently, I wasn't the only one missing deliveries. The Johnsons down the street had lost a shipment of steaks. The elderly couple on the corner said their medication had disappeared twice. Everyone had been too embarrassed or too intimidated by Deborah's position to say anything. By evening, a police cruiser pulled up outside Deborah's pristine colonial with its perfectly trimmed lawn. From my office window, I had a clear view as 2 officers walked up her driveway. She answered the door clutching what looked suspiciously like the carton of oat milk from my grocery list. Even from a distance, I could see her face shift from fake confusion to full indignation as the officers questioned her. The next morning brought the confrontation I'd been dreading. At 7:30 sharp, Deborah stormed up my porch, her face red with fury. I had just poured my first cup of coffee when the doorbell rang. "I know what you did," she snapped, arms crossed, foot tapping. "You sent that ridiculous video to the police and the board. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was?" I kept my composure. "Good morning, Deborah. Would you like to come inside and discuss this like adults?" She didn't wait for an invitation, stepping past me into the living room. "There's nothing to discuss. That video is obviously edited. Anyone with half a brain can see that. I don't need to steal groceries. I drive a Mercedes, for goodness sake." I gestured toward the couch, but she refused to sit, towering over me instead. I don't appreciate being falsely accused. I'm the president of this HOA. I have a reputation to protect. And I'll have you know, I'm considering legal action against you for defamation. Just then, my phone buzzed. Another alert from my doorbell camera. I glanced down at my phone just as the grocery delivery person set my replacement order on the porch. Deborah, Karen, as most neighbors called her, followed my gaze, and I could practically see the realization flicker in her eyes. "I'll be right back," she said with forced casualness. I just remembered I left something in my car. I didn't need the camera this time to know what she was about to do. I followed her to the door and stepped outside just as she bent down to snatch the bags. The delivery driver, halfway back to their car, turned at the sound of us both standing there. "Is there a problem with the delivery?" the driver asked, clearly confused. Karen straightened instantly, tugging at her visor. "Oh, not at all. I was just helping my neighbor bring in his groceries. He has a bad back, don't you, dear?" Her smile was sharp, rehearsed. "My back is fine," I replied evenly. "And those are my groceries, Deborah, just like the ones you took yesterday, and probably the week before." The driver, sensing tension thick enough to cut with a knife, climbed quickly into their car and drove away. Karen's expression cycled wildly, from false concern to indignation, then to something close to panic, before settling into her usual haughty mask. "You're making a mountain out of a molehill," she snapped. It was an honest mistake. Deliveries get mixed up all the time. I thought those groceries were mine. I tilted my head. An easy mistake to make, I suppose. Except my name and address were printed on the receipt. "And you didn't order groceries yesterday, did you?" Her cheeks flushed deep red. "This is ridiculous. I don't have time for this. I have an HOA meeting to prepare for." But before she could retreat, a police cruiser pulled up to the curb. The same two officers from the previous night stepped out, and her posture stiffened immediately. "Mrs. Wilson," one of them said as they approached, "we have a few more questions for you about the incident we discussed yesterday." What followed was equal parts uncomfortable and deeply satisfying. The officers explained that, after reviewing my footage and speaking with other neighbors, they now had evidence pointing to a pattern of theft. They asked if they could search her kitchen. At first she refused, but something in their tone must have convinced her. She relented. I didn't need to go along. Later, my next-door neighbor filled me in. Inside Deborah's kitchen, the officers found no fewer than 3 unclaimed grocery deliveries. Shipping labels and receipts clearly showed they belonged to other residents. My missing organic apples and premium coffee beans were sitting right on her counter. Worse still, another neighbor handed over footage of her stealing packages off their porch on 2 separate occasions. Her excuses collapsed one after another. First denial, then confusion, then the bizarre claim she was collecting misdelivered items to return later, a service no one had asked for. The breaking point came when the officers mentioned a missing prescription package belonging to the elderly couple down the street, a controlled substance. The penalties for stealing it were far more severe than for petty theft. Deborah reportedly went pale. "I didn't know what was in the packages," she stammered, her voice stripped of authority. "I was just trying to keep the neighborhood tidy." That afternoon, Oakwood Estates watched in stunned silence as Deborah Wilson was escorted into a waiting police car. She wasn't in handcuffs, but the defeat in her posture was unmistakable. Designer clothes and perfectly styled hair couldn't disguise how small she suddenly looked. "This is all a misunderstanding," she called out, desperate. "I've paid more in HOA dues than most of you combined. I've maintained property values in this neighborhood for 8 years. No one responded. The silence was louder than any words. The legal consequences came swiftly. She was charged with multiple counts of petty theft, with the stolen prescription elevating one charge to a more serious offense. At her hearing, she was ordered to pay over $2,000 in restitution, plus court fees. She received 6 months probation and 100 hours of community service. The HOA board held an emergency meeting and voted unanimously to remove her as president. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The very bylaws Deborah had weaponized against us provided the means for her own downfall. In court, her carefully maintained facade finally shattered. "This will ruin me," she sobbed, mascara streaking her cheeks. "My real estate clients will find out. My reputation is everything." The judge remained unmoved. "Perhaps you should have considered that before helping yourself to other people's property, Mrs. Wilson." As she was let out, Deborah's eyes met mine. The woman who once chastised me over a mailbox color now looked small, broken, powerless. For the first time since moving into Oakwood Estates, I felt like I truly belonged, not because I bent to every arbitrary rule, but because I had stood up for what was right.